Welcome to Ram and Goat Astrology. Join Helena and me, Laura Lee, each week as we take you on an explorative journey of astrology and health, reading charts, talking planetary energies, while educating and entertaining you. We help you navigate the mysteries of the stars and how they affect you personally. Here we go.
Hello, our recording is in progress. I'm Laura Lee.
And I am Helena. Welcome
Welcome.
to episode, what did we agree on?
14.
Yeah.
Yes. We don't know what's going on today. Ram and Goat Astrology, episode 14. Yes. So we are rocking and rolling. And today we are revisiting the past. And what we have been playing with a little bit in our chats is going back in time to moments in our life where big things have happened, not necessarily on the outside, but big things to us, right? And we've been revisiting the chart of our birth chart and transits for those days. And we thought, what a great thing to do for our show and help people understand kind of how this energy can show up and how this particular transit showed up for us and how it might show up for you if you're going to be experiencing this. So,
And if you want to try this on yourself, you just go to astro.com and you type in your information, and then you go to what's it called, transits and natal chart and transits.
Yeah,
that's what you do. And then you type in the date that you want to know the transits of. Maybe you know that, December 2001 was like a really tough month, or a really good one because you met the love of your life or something. And then you type that in, and then you get to see your chart and the planets, how they were currently sitting in the sky.
Yeah,
that's what we're doing today.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
So Helena, let's dive in. Why don't you pull up your chart and the date and tell us what you were experiencing and what was going on.
So I pulled up the chart for let's see if it's correct here now. Yes, September 11th, 2001. And I think,
which is interesting because you're not the only person who experienced some major stuff that day. And obviously in America, we had a big situation with lots of planes and deaths and tragedy. And you also experienced tragedy. So what happened on this day for you over in Sweden?
Over in Sweden, I was 12 years old, I think. And I was at home with my sister and my best friend at that time. And my sister was going to make French fries. And she'd never done it before. So she was just trying it out. And we didn't have one of those proper things that you do it with. So she was sort of heating up oil on the stove. And we were all standing there looking at her doing it. And suddenly it starts boiling. And it boils over and catches fire immediately. And my friend who's standing there, we're all standing in front of this, seeing it happen. She's holding a glass of water because she was drinking water. So she throws water. Yes, she throws this glass of water at the oil and the flames, and everything just goes. And from there's no turning back. I mean, the fire is taking over. And my sister's running away, and I am just not acting in a good way. We had one of those old phones, connected to with the cord connected to the wall, like 3 meters away from where the fire was going. And I was trying to call my mom at work to let her know that there was a fire, and that I was like, I'm in trouble. And I was just standing there watching the fan melt, staring at that thing melt, and like trying to call my mom, until my sister she ran to the neighbors and called 911, which was the thing to do. And then she came back and caught me standing there just looking at the flames, and had to drag me out of there because I was in shock. And then pretty much the whole kitchen burned down. We couldn't live in that house for a couple of months. They had to redo everything, and also that was sort of the start of like couple of traumatic years within the family, and I won't go into everything right now, but it was really the start of like, I think my granddad passed away shortly after that, and it's all actually a bit blurry because it was so much going on at that time for me.
Yeah, I imagine.
Yeah,
That's a
but
pretty big trauma.
yeah, and I've never looked at the chart actually, and I'm not even really looking at it now, but so that's sort of what happened. Like the house burns down, and then people start dying, and major shifts and crazy things in the family.
Yeah.
And this goes on for like, I don't know, 2 years, a year,
Okay.
something like
Okay.
that.
Okay. Wow. That's major. So where did you end up living after the fire?
So I was staying, my parents stayed in our trailer. We had a trailer or like a caravan. They
Yep.
stayed in there, and I stayed with my best friend for a lot of that time. Sometimes I stayed in the trailer with them, but I pretty much lived with my best friend, and my sister was staying with my grandparents.
Okay. Wow.
So we were split up. The family was split up.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that in and of itself is its own trauma, right? Not only having the fire, but then being split up from your family right after that. That's a big deal. And you were what, 11, you said 12?
I think I was 12, and I'm just sort of 2001.
You would have been in
now?
you're 88, so that would have been 11.
11?
Right? Just before you turned 12, entering into your 12th year.
Mm.
Well, and then of course on top of that, you've got hormones starting, right? So girls are starting to go through puberty at that time. So that's a whole other ball game to deal with on top of the fire and the splitting up of the family, not purposeful, right? But because you had to. And then the death of your grandfather shortly after that, like that's a lot. And I think it's interesting because it's again similar to the tragedy we experienced just in America as a whole, right? It was like one thing after another. The Twin Towers led to the war, and the war led to it was just a lot of intensity that was about 2 to 3 years after. So let's dive into the chart and see where these planets were at. Now, for reading transits, what we were taught with school, with Deborah Silverman's Applied Astrology School, was that you really want to pay close attention to the outer planets making a connection with the personal planets. So that would be like your Pluto and Uranus and Saturn and all of those, connecting to maybe our Mercury or our Mars or our Sun or something like that. Now, outer to outer isn't normally the most influential personally, right? But when you look at this particular day you happen to choose, it wasn't just personal, right? There is a global thing too. So with the World Trade Center that was attacked, it wasn't just an American thing, right? So let's dive in. So we have Mars entered into Capricorn just a little bit before that. So that's the first thing I see.
And I just have to say, because I'm realizing that I was a little bit off with the years. All of the other stuff that happened after, I felt like it was all together, but that was actually when I was around 14.
Okay.
The other family stuff, but to me, I think it was everything started there and then just kept going for like 3-4 years. Yeah,
it was a continuous thing. Yeah. Well, when we're 14, we're entering our Saturn opposition. So your Saturn in September 2001 was not opposite your natal Saturn yet. But after you got through the tragedy of the house fire and all of that, that's when you would have entered your Saturn opposition Saturn. So it would have just merged together. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So with Mars in Capricorn, that's the first thing I see, because that's the animalistic kind of instinctual energy, right? And that's the fight, and that's our drive, and that's our ambition. And Capricorn is all about structure and foundation and hard work. And your structure and foundation of your life, like, it disappeared.
Yeah.
So you had a lot of drive and ambition to kind of rebuild your structure and your foundation, but it's hidden in your 12th house. So this is a generational thing. It's literally living with, visiting grandparents or living at friends' houses or your parents, living somewhere else. There's generational stuff involved here. And you had just Mars had just gone over Uranus and Saturn just a little bit before that.
Yeah.
So we've got that. We've got Pluto and Sagittarius at this time. So what is he opposite to? He would be opposite. What's the degree of Pluto? Can you scroll down and check?
The degree of
where Pluto is at
12
degrees. Okay. 12
so
degrees.
I don't really have anything. Well, it's my house is down there, so small, but could it be in the 4th house?
Yes,
12.
it would be. It would be. Yep,
So,
it would.
Yeah. And the 4th house is all about your home.
Yeah.
It's your home.
And Gemini is twins in duality. So Pluto would be opposite your 4th house, and Saturn and Pluto would have just made a transit to each other. What degree is Saturn at? Transiting Saturn.
Transiting Saturn is at 14.
Okay, so we're within 2 degrees of our orb here. So with transits, you're looking at about 5 degrees. And if Saturn and Pluto are 2 degrees apart, and Saturn had just moved into your 5th house of play and fun and childhood, and you had to grow up real quick. And you had hard lessons with your childhood, and this duality of Gemini, and Pluto was making sure that you were kind of digging in and learning these lessons with Sagittarius Pluto and a Gemini Saturn. There's a lot of learning involved, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And this particular day, the moon was in Gemini, right on your Venus.
Yeah.
So on your home and your possessions and what you loved.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a very, very, very emotional day, of course.
Yeah.
It's crazy because I remember that I didn't hear about what happened in the States, obviously, because I was just so disconnected to everything. And I remember how strange it was hearing about it after, and that this whole day had passed without me knowing about it, and then like having to catch up
afterwards.
Yeah.
Also, I noticed transiting North Node happens to be on top of your Chiron as well.
Oh, yeah.
So there's that aspect.
There's that, and I'm looking at Pluto and Chiron and Mars, and is that series the one that looks like a
yes?
Yeah, and all of those because this was the start of so many things happening within my family and also within my sort of friend circle. I remember like being broken up with from my best friend, and it was really tough. And Pluto's going through my 11th house. It's just starting to come to my 11th house, which is sort of your social circles and friends.
Yep.
And it's really like I remember how I was distraught because I felt like I didn't have any friends, and everyone was like, I felt like I couldn't trust anyone, which is Pluto stuff for sure.
Which would make sense for sure.
For sure. And then Pluto entering my 12th house of generational traumas and so much going on within the family.
Yeah.
And also Chiron in the 12th house. So that explains all of those years of mishmash, strange.
Well, and Saturn and Gemini too, because Saturn and Gemini really is Gemini is, I love me some Gemini, don't get me wrong, right? But there's a two-faced energy with Gemini, right? And it could be a good or a bad, I'm not judging it, but you just have to recognize there's the duality with Gemini. So I'm guessing at this time, you were not being told the whole story about things. You were not being told the truth, right? Maybe you were quote unquote too young, or your parents felt you were too young, or, like maybe there was some information, because Gemini is all about information and intellectual stuff. So, and Saturn and Sagittarius too. So when Saturn is in a sign like this, there's usually like hard work to do around that energy. And I'm wondering if maybe you were not being told the whole thing as Saturn was transiting through your 5th house of children, right? And play. And you were kind of like getting told one thing, but maybe instinctually you knew something else was going on, right? Maybe there was some financial stuff your parents were really struggling with, or insurance stuff, but you didn't know the whole story. Does that make sense too?
Yeah, it does, because I feel like it was a lot like that. I was feeling all of these things happening and changing, but I wasn't really told, at least not from the beginning. I felt it way faster than when they shared information with me, for sure. It was a lot of that lack of information and not knowing,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
feeling it.
Yeah. Yeah, because again, with that air sign, you can sense it, and then your brain goes, wait a minute, what am I feeling here? Right? Like you can sense the energy through the shifting of the air, but not necessarily an energetic air, right? But not necessarily intellectually understand it yet. This happens for me all the time with my Gemini moon and rising. I can feel stuff, and then it's like my brain has to catch up and figure out what I just felt. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. That's how it felt for me. Yeah. I'm looking at all of the transiting planets, trying to figure out for like just globally the energy and what was going on, because it was, I mean, everyone knows that date.
Right.
It was a huge tragedy, and the whole, I mean, I don't know the whole world, but at least in Sweden, we're far away from America. Here, it was, we also had the feeling of like something big is happening, something huge is shifting, and we don't know up from down, and how can something like this happen? Pretty much.
I think the Pluto opposite Saturn transit had a lot to do with that energy. I really do. I think when you have Pluto in a fire sign and Saturn in a air sign, I mean, I have a lot of fire and air oppositions. I know this energy. You gotta recognize how intense fire and air can be. And I mean, when you watch documentaries of the Twin Towers and all of that, and you watch documentaries of how all that happened and played out, there's a lot of questions and there's a lot of conspiracy theories that I'm not saying I agree nor disagree with, but there's just a lot of unanswered questions and a lot of two-faced kind of energy that Saturn and Gemini really played a role in the American public, where like we were not being told the whole story, right? And that fire and air, man, shit blows up. And it blew up. And it blew up in a lot of different ways. But I think that Saturn-Pluto opposition really played an intense role that day, for sure. And then when you put Mars in Capricorn, I mean, that's a restructuring, that's a drive and a fight and an energy of combativeness in this sign that is very hardworking and very independent and very structural and functional minded. And I think that's an interesting thing, that your home, right, caught on fire, and these buildings caught on fire by, airplanes. And when you think about Sagittarius, it's the archer launching fire arrows into the sky. And that's really what these planes ended up being, right? And it's very interesting noticing that Chiron is there in Sagittarius as well. And so a lot of people had some very intense wound resurfacing that day, wounds resurfacing that day.
Yeah. I wonder if you could see somehow how many more fires than the average fire per day on the whole planet was, if things were catching fire a lot more around these states because of these placements.
That would be really interesting. Really interesting.
Should we dive into one of your dates?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's do that.
You want to pause and I'll click them in because I'm slow.
Sure. All right, so we're going to dive into the transits of one of my situations in life. So I decided to pull up the date August 5th, 2008. And this is a very important date. This is actually the date that I conceived my first child. And it was a major thing. Now, I didn't find out for probably about 2-3 weeks after this. But this was the date we conceived. And it was 5.5 years in the making. I had fertility issues. We tried fertility treatments. We tried pursuing adoption. We were turned down several times from that. We could not do surrogacy. That was not an option financially for us. We had just pursued everything and anything. And finally, we ended up kind of surrendering to the powers that be. I had a very spiritual experience earlier this year in March 2008, and ended up really giving in and surrendering and focusing on our health and well-being, and got rid of the chemicals and endocrine disruptors in our home, like all the air fresheners and stuff like that. We cleaned up our diet. My husband and I both did a cleanse, and lo and behold, we got pregnant. So I wanted to pull this chart up because I'd never looked at it before, and I'm intrigued by the energy as we, discuss this. So the first thing I notice is there are 2 planets transiting my 4th house of parenting, and one of them happens to be Saturn, and the other happens to be Venus. So Venus is our relationship planet, our love planet, our values and possessions, and the things that we really hold most dear. And at this point in our journey, it had been exactly 5 years. So it was at this point, it was about going on 5.5. So in September of that year, it would have been 5.5 years since we'd started trying to get pregnant. And it was exhausting journey. And it was very, very mentally and emotionally taxing, financially taxing. And I was fairly obsessed with this journey, and I could not rectify this need, right? This urge to become a parent. And this is the day we conceived. So at this point, we had the sun in Leo, Mercury was in Leo, and Venus were in Leo. And my 4th house of parenting starts at 21 degrees Leo. And then Saturn was in Virgo in my 4th house at this time. So Virgo is health and well-being and your wellness and being of service. And during this Saturn Virgo time frame, I guess I didn't even realize. I bet if I go back and a little bit further, when we started like cleaning our body out, I bet you Saturn had just entered into Virgo. I bet I can find exactly when that happened. So we really were working hard, which is Saturn, on our health. And we were starting to change all of our grocery shopping to organic. We were cooking a lot more. We were learning how to eat differently. We were taking a lot more supplements. We were really just focusing on the physical and emotional well-being of ourselves. And man, if that's not Saturn and Virgo, I don't know what is.
Yeah.
What else jumps out at you?
Well, I'm looking at Mars in your 5th house. So the 5th house would be like the baby making house. And then Mars is drive and sex and like creating things, like projects, starting projects. So that is a clear indicator, I think, that you could get pregnant.
It was good timing. And my Mars and Saturn are both in the 5th house natally. So those are natal placements I have, and they are something when you have Saturn in the 5th house, you have to just know that should you want to have children, you're going to work hard. It's going to take a while. It is not going to happen instantaneously, and you're probably going to be older when you have them. And I'm laughing because I'm 40 and pregnant. So was not on my plan. Let me tell you that one. At the time we started trying to conceive, I was 20. And we had just gotten married. We were with the Air Force. Everybody gets married and has babies very young in the Air Force or the military. It was just very normal. So when I conceived Elliot at 27 or 26 and had him at 27, to me, that felt like it was older, right? Like, I had my kids when I was older. Well,
I'm an old mom.
Right.
28.
Right. Yep. So it is very interesting to view this. So having Venus and Saturn in the 4th house of family and mothering, parenting in Virgo, and then Mars in Virgo in the 5th. And the moon happened to be in Virgo in the 5th house that day as well.
Yeah,
so emotionally, I was calling this kiddo to us. I find it interesting that he is a Leo rising.
Oh, yeah.
He
Because
was
the
conceived.
sun was in Leo, yeah.
Yeah, he was conceived during this Sun Mercury Leo energy with my fourth house in Leo, and he's a very intense, very shiny
Do you
Leo
remember
rising.
his the degree of his rising sign?
I don't, but I'll have to check into that.
Yeah. Let's
I'm
see
very
if
curious now.
if it would be at
Lining
anywhere
up.
near 12 degrees.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that would be cool.
And another
But
thing I'm seeing too is of seventh house of marriage and partnership. Jupiter was going through there in Capricorn at this time, retrograde, and Pluto was going through my seventh house in Sagittarius, and he happened to be retrograde. So I was having marriage luck, but also having to still work hard. And we were going through a lot of transformation and a lot of personal discovery. But Pluto happens to be almost opposite my he's a little far away, but opposite my rising sign. So I had just gone through quite a bit of energy as I was working on conceiving, right? All of that energy before that was very, very much transformative for me. I really had to transform who I was because I thought I would have a family one way, right? And the universe was like, no, it's going to be a different way. And you get to transform your relationship and how you work one-on-one with people as you go through this. And it was a really transformative time for me. A lot of people, when you get married and my whole family was, when are you going to have babies? When are you going to have babies? And I started to get really snarky and sarcastic and be like, well, we've been working on it for 4 years. None of your business.
yeah.
Like, I would really start to school people on that energy. And I'm looking right now, and during this time frame, Uranus is opposite of Mars in Pisces and Virgo. And Uranus is such an interesting planet because he just causes chaos in these fun, disruptive ways that you can't even predict. And even when he's opposite Mars, man, some of the crap that can come out of your mouth can just be interesting.
Yeah, that's what Uranus does. It brings things like you never know what's going to happen when Uranus.
No.
All you can know is that you will not know what's going to happen. It will be unexpected. But I'm looking now at Neptune, and it was transiting your natal Venus.
Yeah.
Which you could see that as, and your Venus is in the 10th house of working hard. So whatever you love, I think you have to work on it. You have to give it a lot of work, put in the work. And with Neptune crossing over Venus, you could see it as, you putting things on a pedestal, things that you love. You're not really seeing clearly about relationships and those things. But you could also see it as everything that you love, you can get more in touch with that in different spaces than just the physical space here. So sort of like calling something in from above.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at the glyph, how Neptune looks, which is sort of a person with their arms up, sort of downloading energy.
Like, I'm ready, fill my cup now.
Yeah. And it's on Venus. It's like, I want a baby, I'm working on it, it's in my 10th house, I'm working hard. And then Venus is just like,
well, and my natal Venus is trine to Saturn in my 5th house of procreation. So again, we have good energy and supportive energy of this is your spiritual time, right? And for me, my children and I, we are very spiritually connected. We have all had past lives together. Elliot and I have a very interesting past life that I knew immediately when he was born. Like, I got this like almost like a download, like whoom, like it came to me. And since then, more of the picture has gotten filled out. He was a prince in like the Roman Empire, kind of like the Greece area. And he had a major, major ego. And he really wanted to prove himself. I was his teacher. So I was the person they hired. I was a male, like an old sage kind of dude, right? And we had a very close connection. I pretty much raised this ego-filled prince from a very young child. Yeah, from a very young child. And I was his tutor, and we had a lot to learn. And we connected really well in like philosophy and religion and music and art and all of those areas. But we had clashes when it came to like what he wanted and his ego, right? Which is exactly us now. Like, exactly.
Wow.
And Elliot actually ended up taking a couple of men and going out to prove his worth to his father, and ended up getting himself killed. He got an arrow through his chest, and he actually has a giant mole on his chest and another one in his back. And I was like, that's where your arrow went through. And it's very, very interesting because we didn't finish what we were supposed to do in that lifetime. And so now we came back again together in this one to heal those wounds. And we still have this Leo rising where he thinks he's a prince, right? And I have to be like, sorry, wrong lifetime, honey. No.
And I haven't, I mean, for those who doesn't know, me and Laura have never met. We're, I was going to say we met on an online dating service, but we did not. It was an online study. So we never met. So I never met Elliot, but I've seen him through here a couple of times, and I can really pick up on that Prince vibe. He's like maybe it's things that you told me as well, but I really see him as this kind of like Prince person. But I want to ask you, how do you get these downloads? How would you get that information that you have now about this past life?
It comes to me like almost like you're watching clips from a movie. Like it shows up kind of in my forehead area. And sometimes it happens instantly like that. Sometimes it trickles in almost through a fog, like it's foggy, and then all of a sudden it's more clear. Sometimes it's part of a story where it starts at a scene and ends at a certain scene. But it happens with certain people in certain environments, or if I'm in like a meditative state. And lately I've been like tuning in and getting stronger with this and taking classes. But at this time, this was one of the first times that it like was very, very clear and apparent. And it happened within a few days of his birth. So this is where Neptune on Venus trine Saturn, like this is where my connection really seems to play in the spiritual realm. Like Neptune is spirit, right? In connection with spirit. And it's transiting my value and possession and the things I love most. And that's trining Saturn in procreation and fun and relationships in Libra, Libra. So for me, this is like a fated relationship, right? This is a spiritual connection. We have been together before. And so that's the Venus Neptune really like solidifies that in my head. I've never seen this before. I've never looked at this, but that's what I see right there is like, we were connected in spirit. This was before we've gotten this. But the image and the scene of his past life and me showed up a real little blurb, a real little like pow, kind of like it threw it at me. And I was like, oh, you were a prince and I was your teacher and you died in battle way too young. Like he was like early 20s. So like, that's all I got at first. Yeah. And then the picture started to fill out more and more and more and more.
I think you'd be interested to see if you type in Elliot's birth information there and see the transits on your natal chart on his birthday. When he was born.
I'll have to do that for sure. Hang on.
Yeah. So now we're going to look at where the planets were compared to Laura's natal chart at the time of her first kid's birth.
Find this. Hang on. Let me do this. Yeah, I've not checked that out either. Now I'm excited to do that.
Yeah, because Neptune was retrograding over your Venus, so it would be going back, and Neptune moves really, really slow. So I'm sure Neptune would still be maybe exactly over your Venus. Let's see.
All right. Oh, this is interesting. Let's see what we got here. Okay. So I'm just sharing the screen for those of you not watching. So I'm pulling this up. So at the time he was born, April 25th, 2009. We had Neptune.
Neptune has gone far past.
Yeah. So Neptune's at 26 degrees Aquarius, and my Venus is at 22. And then we've got Jupiter showed up here at 23 degrees Aquarius. So now Jupiter and Chiron is at 25. So we got a 23, a 25, and a 26 degree Aquarius. And my Venus is at 22. So a lot of stuff happening the day I gave birth was Jupiter on top of Venus. That's funny. I was very
Jupiter
large.
on top of Venus. Yeah. You would have been the largest at the largest
I was
point
very
of
large.
pregnancy. That's funny.
So
Yeah,
that would have
Jupiter
been
expands everything.
that would have been, for those of you not looking at the chart, a transiting Jupiter trine my natal Saturn in the house of creativity and procreation. So we've got a Aquarius Jupiter, and it's trine to this Libra Saturn. And so we've got very, very large and hard work. And I don't know if any of you have been pregnant, but that's what that is. I was large and hard work. But yeah, he's got, that's, I should know this because he has all of this in his natal chart, obviously. This Venus, or this Neptune, Chiron, Jupiter conjunction. And it's hard because he's 13 and a half and he's experiencing some Chiron hurts right now in Aquarius. And so there's some friendships and stuff that are ending, and I can see it happening, and I'm like, oh no. And they're Aquarian friendships, and I'm like, this is how it happens.
Yeah. So he's 13, you said?
Yeah, 13 and a half.
Yeah. So he's closing in on Saturn opposite Saturn.
He is. That's coming up next year. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, this is interesting. The day he was born, we had his sun and moon and his Mercury are in Taurus, and those happen to be all in my 12th house. So again, when he was born, I got this flash of who he was. And so they are all three in my 12th house, which we're using the Campanus system right now, which is a different one than most people use, but the sign of Taurus is completely encompassed in my 12th house and is actually quite hard for me to access. So here comes this firstborn child of mine who's like, let me help you, Mom.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So, and then at the time he was born, Uranus happened to be literally on top of my Mercury. So this makes for really interesting and eccentric conversations with him. And a lot of, I don't want to say combativeness, but it is combativeness. It's not intentional combativeness, but when the way I think and communicate causes him to want to rebel and be free, well, that's just, that's just what it is.
That's it. And that's just what it is. Yeah, that could be seen as or felt like combativeness, that he just wants to go, because sometimes Uranus just wants to go against you because he wants to be different and because he wants to rebel.
He is the king of rebuttaling everything I say. And I don't know if you know the word rebuttal in Sweden, but it's just like argue everything. So I'll say something, and instead of just agreeing or just saying okay or thanks so much, there's like this kind of response that's like a irritating argument. And he doesn't mean to do it, and he's not doing it intentionally.
I'm sure that that just comes out without him thinking about it. It's just his natural response.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it was a very interesting time in my life when this kiddo came and when he was conceived, and then when he showed up, and very profound shifting for me as Saturn was entering my 5th house. Now Saturn takes 30 years to go through the cycle, and so this won't happen again till I'm close to probably like 57 or so. So this 5th house Saturn really made me work hard at learning how to have fun, learning how to be with children, learning how to play, and really create a structure and a foundation around health and well-being, because it's still in Virgo, and being of service to myself and my child. And this was the time of life for me that I really learned how to recognize what self-care is and really learn how to implement it. And it was not an easy time by any means. But Saturn really, you learn the lesson wherever Saturn's at, you learn it.
Yeah. For
sure.
So should we jump to the next date?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, so we're back, and now we're going to take a look at my chart again, but for another event. And so now we jump ahead a couple of years into the future, and I am 19, I think. And this is as close as I can remember to the date where I moved across the globe to Australia from Sweden. And I had been living a very, I want to say sheltered life, but it's not like I was sheltered in that way where I wasn't allowed to go and like meet friends or anything like that, but just very super duper well looked after, I guess.
Right.
And had a worried mom, and now I chose to like leave my whole family and leave all that and across the whole globe where no one can know where I am, and it just was a huge deal.
Big
Yeah.
shift. Big shift.
Big shift. I remember in the beginning I was super anxious. The first sort of 2 weeks when I got there, I was very anxious. Bless you. Bless. But then it grew into this sort of loving the freedom, and I just really bloomed there. And one of the best decisions I've ever made. Now I'm back in Sweden, but that really, I needed that for growing up, for like testing my wings, trying it out myself. And yeah, so this is sort of when I moved to Australia. And we have the sun in Sagittarius, Venus in Sagittarius. And we all know that Sagittarius loves adventures and freedom.
And travel.
And traveling, learning new things. Yeah. And I have my Saturn and Uranus natally in Sagittarius at 26 and 27 degrees. And at this date, the sun in the sky was lighting that up. So it's really lighting up my sort of the lessons I have to learn about freedom and being a cowboy. And it was very awkward for me, and it hurt a little bit, that, and hence the those bad feelings that I had, but it was something that I needed to do.
Absolutely. I feel like when you have this planet of chaos and rebelliousness and independence and freedom right next to Saturn, which is structure and hard work and discipline, and then the sun comes around and is right on top of both of those, like you can't not acknowledge that. It's like the sun is going, hey, let me shine a light on this intense part of you.
Yeah.
You can't ignore that. You can't.
No, you can't. And my first house, as you can see, is huge. Yeah. But we can see here that the North Node has sort of very recently entered my first house. Yeah. So the North Node is it's sort of about like your destiny, your soul's destiny, what you're set out to do.
Yeah, your spiritual journey.
Your spiritual journey. And the first house is very much the self and the body and you. Yeah. And I feel like I was going through a huge personality shift.
I bet you were. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And it's interesting to me. I love 12th house. I absolutely love 12th house. That's where all of the intuitive hits come from for me. That's where all of the generational stuff shows up for me, the generational traumas, and then also the past life stuff. And for you, you've got in the Campanus house system we're playing with here, you've got 4 planets in the 12th. And at the time of you moving, Venus, the sun, Pluto, and Mercury were transiting the 12th house. And like you said, the North Node literally is on your rising sign the date you moved. So, or just as like a hair and a fraction past. So you've got all of this 12th house stuff, which tells me this was a very spiritual thing you needed to do. Maybe you're from Australia in some past life. Maybe you were an Aboriginal at some point and you really connected with that land, or you needed to. Maybe this was a generational lineage thing, right? Maybe you've got family members who in spirit who called you there for some lessons. But there's definitely, in my mind, a spiritual connection that really pulled you there. Now, I know for you, it was you kind of having this rebelliousness, right? But what do you remember at the time, what it was that really pulled you there?
Well, the thing is, my friends were there.
Okay.
So it was very much thanks to them. Otherwise, I would never have dared to do this, because my friend is more of a, she loves traveling. She was always traveling. And then she was like, come and see me in Australia. And so about 8 months prior to this, I actually went to visit her for a couple of weeks. And then I came back to Sweden, and I think I had gotten a taste of the freedom. And she asked that I should come back, and I went.
And that's such an Aquarius thing with Jupiter and Neptune were conjunct, and you could throw Chiron in there too. They're only a few degrees apart. So you got Chiron, Jupiter, and Neptune all conjunct in Aquarius in your first house of self, or I need to do this. I want to do this. And Jupiter, if there's any downfall to Jupiter, is that he really gets a little too exuberant about things, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, that's really, he gets overly optimistic about things. But I feel like with Neptune there, again, it's another confirmation that this was a spiritual pull for you. This was not just like my friends were there. Yes, Aquarius and Jupiter. Yeah, I got friends over there, right? For sure. But with Chiron and Neptune right there as well, this was a wound healer and a spiritual pull for you. I bet if you went back and really dug into your time in Australia, I bet you would really see a lot of turning points in your healing journey.
It was. I feel like almost that is the beginning of me. Because I think that prior to that, I had been so much in my Capricornness, and just been the responsible one at home, doing what I was supposed to do, in a relationship that I didn't want to be in. And very much playing safe, playing small, pleasing everyone else. And then I moved there, and I partied so hard, tried. I don't know if my parents are going to listen to this, but tried a lot of different stimulants.
Yeah, you did Aquarius stuff. You did very much Aquarius stuff. That is Jupiter and Aquarius. Again, he gets a little too much fun, a little bit too out there, right? That's really, and of course with Jupiter on Neptune, Neptune rules drugs. Now, I don't have any morals one way or another with drugs. People use what they use because this life is hard and this game is hard. But when you've got Jupiter on Neptune, absolutely that is an intense, hey, let me explore the other realms, right? Let me check out on a pretty epic, fun level, right? Not check out permanently, but check out in a fun, chaotic way. Aquarius, Jupiter, Neptune, Aquarius, right? Like you've got to recognize this rebelliousness. I would be surprised if you didn't try stuff.
And I was not rebellious before I moved there. I wasn't a rebel. I when my friends would do something bad, I would always sort of stand guard and be the one who's like, oh no, stop it, there's people coming.
Your Capricorn rising. Oh absolutely. You were the parent of everybody.
But then that's it. I stopped being the parent. I was so much acting my age when I moved there. I got to be this free-spirited, carefree, crazy cowboy. And just trying it, and just really, really loving the freedom. I felt so free.
And a few weeks after you would have been there, Mars is transiting, would have been in Leo at that time. And at about, let's see, 5, 10, 15, 20 degrees Leo. So just a few weeks after you got there, Mars would have been opposite that Jupiter Neptune energy. So you would have had this fire air combo. And again, when you combine fire and air, guess what you get? And Leo is all about fun. And Aquarius really likes some fun too, because they like to be unique. So I imagine you were just really enjoying this freedom, this intense freedom.
It was really something intense.
Yeah, absolutely. But with Mars through your 7th house, you probably always had a buddy or a friend.
I did. Yeah. The friend I went there to spend time with, she she had to leave Australia because of the visa, maybe 2 months after I came there.
Okay.
And then I just felt like I'll stay on my own and see what happens. And then it just so happened that a new girl moved into the house, and we became best friends instantaneously. And we're still very, very good friends, and we just became like sisters. Yeah, we
I
did
love it.
everything together. Yeah.
And at this time, it was a Saturn in Libra transit. So this was Saturn takes
She's a
a while.
Libra.
Isn't
Yeah.
that funny? And it's in your seventh house. So you lost one friend, that's hard, and then gain another friend, and that's that balance, right? Saturn wants you to work hard with balance in relationships. You were also probably struggling with balance in relationships with your family because you weren't there, right? And
That was tough.
they didn't understand why you were over there and what you were doing. So Saturn with peace and harmony and justice, hard work there, hard work.
That was really, really hard. And that was a time, I mean, I didn't have an internet on my phone. Whenever, the only way I contacted my family was through a payphone. And that was maybe once a week.
Oh, so they couldn't really reach you.
They could not reach me. And that must have been so hard for them. I remember in the beginning, every time I spoke with my mom, she cried every single time.
I bet she did. I
Yeah.
bet she did. That probably was very, very difficult. And again, look at all the stuff in your 12th house of generations, right? Generational stuff they don't understand. This isn't what you do. You don't just leave your family and go to another country on your own for no reason, right? There's a lot of confusion there among the generations. I bet your grandparents were really struggling too, whether in physical form or in spirit form, right? Because here's Helena with her Mars in Aries in her first house, and it happens to be opposite Saturn in Libra. So you're having this Saturn opposition Libra, or opposition Mars, excuse me, at the time in this Aries Libra energy. So again, fire and air.
Fire and air. Yeah, I remember that
fire
was.
And air.
Yeah, I think that was the huge shift, because I was always the responsible one at home and all of that. And then now, I did this thing that was super crazy to them, and they did not understand it at all. I kept getting that question: why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this?
And with that Saturn Mars, I imagine it was like a big old middle finger, like, I just want to, leave me alone, right?
I felt like that for sure. Yeah.
Just let me be what I want to be and do what I want to do. Leave me alone.
And I remember I started smoking when I got there. I became a smoker, and they came to visit me, and my mom hates cigarettes. And I remember just picking up cigarette after cigarette and smoking in front of her, only because I was like, I am done being the responsible one.
Yep. Oh, look at that. And at that time, Uranus was going through Pisces, through your first house as well. So we've got rebelliousness in the sign that is most susceptible to drug usage in some way, shape, or form. So, for sure you were going to rebel. And of course you picked the one thing that would really make your mom mad, right? Like,
I mean, everything would have made her mad, all of the things I tried, but that was the thing that I chose to show her.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, interesting. I really think that North Node transiting your rising sign really played a bigger role than we realize. I really do. I
think so. It was a shift. It was like life before that, life after that was not the same.
Yep. And which would be what a lot of people experience when there's major planets or outer planets that transit our rising sign. It's very much a shift in that realm. Whether my husband's about to go through Uranus over his rising sign in the next year or so, and I'm like, who are you gonna become?
Who are you gonna be after that?
Because
a different
he's not
person.
Gonna be the same. Yeah, you're not the same person. You can't be. When something goes over your rising sign, your sign of how you show up to the world. This is how I show myself. It's the clothing I wear, the way I wear my hair, the makeup I do. And when a big transit happens, you change who you are and how you show up to the world. And girl, you did it on an epic level. Good job, you.
Thanks. I mean, then Pluto came to crossing my rising, so that made me another person again.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, let's take a look at my last one.
All right, so we have a new chart up, and this is the last one we'll dive into for digging into the past. This chart is from August 25th, 2016, and this was, again, Green Bay, Wisconsin. So this was a time in my life. I had three children. My youngest was just about two. She just turned two. This is actually the point I wrote. I don't have it right here. It's over there. I wrote a chapter for a book that was recently published on Amazon called Dare to Express. And my chapter, actually, I just realized this now. This is the time in my life I wrote my chapter on. This was a really, really, really hard time. My husband and I were really exploring alternate things with our marriage, and we had opened our marriage earlier this year, and we're kind of exploring that realm and what that looked like. And at that time, I had Venus conjunct Jupiter, conjunct Mercury, all going through my fifth house. And for those of you that don't know, fifth house also rules recreational and fun sex.
Yeah.
So Jupiter, again, here's a great example of too much of a good thing is not always a good thing.
Jupiter expands everything. So Jupiter would have expanded Venus and like everything that you love about fun and sex and flirt.
Yep. And I notice right now I'm seeing that it is opposite my natal Mercury, which is how I think and how I communicate. And Chiron happened to be transiting on top of my natal Mercury at this time as well. So we've got Jupiter highlighting the way I think. We've got Jupiter expanding Venus. We've got Jupiter expanding Chiron. Like there's a lot of Jupiter influential energy among this fifth house. And then also my natal Mercury's in the sign of Pisces in the 11th. So friendships and community, we very much changed our community and the people we were hanging out with. But what happened to me that was really profound and not even beyond the marriage is my physical health tanked into a way that I don't think I can describe fully, other than I was becoming paralyzed. At the time, I didn't know this, but the lower discs, or the discs in my lower back, lumbar region, L1, 2, 3, and 4, were almost completely degenerated. And I started having a bulging disc, a herniated disc, and then I was basically unable to do anything except stand or lay down. I could not sit well, I could not dance or twist, I could not lift my babies, and I could not really do anything productive. Now, we were working very hard on creating a sustainable farm and providing produce for the community. We had a community supported agriculture program we were doing where people would buy shares of our produce. And I don't know if you know, but August 25th is like major harvest time. You need to be in the garden, bending and processing and all of that, right? And I couldn't. It was pretty awful. And so I'm looking at these transits, and the first one I see is Saturn conjunct Mars in my sixth house of health. And I'm like, ooh, ouch. Like I can feel it, right? And both of them had actually just gone over the top of my natal Uranus. So what I'm assuming and thinking is if I go back a little bit to when they were on top of my natal Uranus, I bet you I can pinpoint a specific thing that happened that then led to, the triggers and everything. But this is the week. It was within this week where I experienced my first herniated disc and was unable to stand or move or anything. I was actually weeding the melons. I remember it like it was yesterday. I was in the garden weeding the melons and trimming them and keeping them all lovely. And I stood up, and that was it. Like it was, I went from a kneeling, crawling in the dirt position to standing, and I couldn't function. I couldn't walk. My left leg felt like it was completely paralyzed. I couldn't like power it to move it forward. I kind of dragged it while crying and fairly scream crying all the way to the house.
And we ended up calling my chiropractor and begging her to come to our home because I was not going to the hospital for this. I knew they weren't going to really do much. She came and adjusted, and she checked out, and she said, I think you need to go get an MRI done. And so within a day or two, I did. And that's when we found the evidence that the doctor looked at it and said, this looks like the spine of an 80 to 90-year-old. And at the time I was 34. So that was a really hard, very heartbreaking thing to hear. And Saturn and Mars sitting there together. I mean, Saturn is your physical body. It's your structure. And Mars is your drive and your go. I couldn't go because my physical structure was busted. And my sixth house of health was really being affected profoundly. And then here we're having all of this fifth house energy with this open marriage and all of that stuff. And Pluto was transiting through my seventh house at this time as well.
I was looking at that. It was just sort of on the last degrees of your seventh house.
Yep. And my husband's got a lot of Capricorn and placements and a lot of Capricorn energy. And so Pluto was going over the top of quite a few of his things. So he's having all kinds of Pluto transits. I'm experiencing all of this massive health stuff. And then Chiron is activating my Mercury very, very profoundly, which is connected to quite a few things in my sixth house. So the way I was thinking was really being affected. My mental health was taking a massive, massive toll because of the physical pain. And that's one thing I really identify with as a health coach. And when I help people with health and do my coaching sessions with them, is the first thing I address is, how is your mental health dealing with the chronic pain? Because unless you've had chronic pain like that, where you can't move, and everything you do hurts, you don't understand how much it mentally takes a toll on you, because you don't complain about it to everybody. You don't say, oh, I hurt right now. Oh, I hurt right now. Oh, that hurt, right? Like, you just keep that all in. And you typically only complain when it really hurts, right? There's like a threshold that you finally will complain at. And for me, it was really starting to affect me mentally on a pretty profound level, where I was getting really yucky and nasty with my children. Pretty much anyone who was in my line of sight would get a very, very, very intense response, even though I didn't mean to, right? Like, I would hurt them with my words. And it was just a horrible time. And the chapter I ended up writing in this Dare to Express book really was about a day in the life of when the kids were little, and I had a horrible pain day, didn't sleep, and I lost my shit. I lost it like bad. And I screamed things I would never, ever, ever want to repeat to anyone. I hurt my children verbally and mentally and emotionally that day. And it was a deep, 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 dark time in my life. And I'm just looking at this Chiron on top of Mercury in Pisces. And, for those of you who have Pisces placements, that shit can get dark. That shit can get real dark. And it is a very yucky time when you just want to escape your own body and your own mind, and you can't, So
do you want to tell us a little bit about Ceres in Scorpio?
Yeah. So
because
Ceres,
I can see that that is connected too from Mercury.
It is.
And Mercury is affected by Chiron.
Exactly. So Ceres is actually considered a dwarf planet, and she's a planet or a asteroid that gives us the energy of how we feel nourished and nurtured and taken care of, how our bucket gets filled. So it's different than our emotional needs with our moon, and it's different than Venus. This is our nourishment. Like when you have a really good, yummy meal that just fits your body and just really works for you, and you feel so nourished and nurtured, right? That's what Ceres is. And that's in my sixth house, also in Scorpio. And it's connected in a trine to this Mercury and then conjunct transiting Chiron. So Chiron was activating my Ceres, where I was having to really, really dig deep, Scorpio, to learn how to nurture and nourish myself in a completely different way. I was having to transform that.
pretty epically.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was intense. It was a really, really intense time. And if you notice as well, the sun at this time was going through my fourth house of parenting and nurturing and healing, right? Cancer rules the fourth house. So, and it happened to be in the sign of Virgo. And for those of you that don't know, Virgo rules health and well-being.
Yeah.
And at this time there was Sun, North Node, Venus, Jupiter, and Mercury all in Virgo. So this is very health related.
Wow.
And then Mars and Saturn in my sixth house of health. So a lot of health energy was going on with me at this time. And that's not just physical, it's also mental health. So this was a profound turning point in my life where I recognized my life wasn't going to be the same and it couldn't continue the same, and I had to do other things. Sometimes those lessons are a little harder to learn, and this one took me about a year before I fully took action on anything that was not anything, but where I took more major action, and I ended up starting the process for stem cell transplants. But before that, I was really managing with massages, chiropractic care, acupuncture, and supplements and oils. So I was doing as best as I could, but I was seeing a chiropractor probably 3 times a week.
Yeah.
Just to be able to maintain stability. I was wearing a back brace. I was ultimately really paralyzed from, just when you can, not fully, but when you can only stand and lay down. That's not very helpful in life. So there's a lot going on with me at that time. And it's interesting to look at the transits and everything and what's going on. So that's how that manifested for me. And one of the reasons we wanted to dive into this is because you don't know how this energy is going to show up. You know,
no, you don't.
You just can't predict it. So it's interesting for me to go back and go, 4 planets in Virgo and 2 in my 6th house, and they happen to be Saturn and Mars on top of each other. Oh, that makes sense, right? Like, look at that. And they both
crossing
just went
over Uranus.
both just went over the planet of chaos and sudden change.
You can almost hear the snap in your back looking at that.
For real. For real. Yeah. It really was profound. And my back issues started when I was pregnant with my 3rd child, but I worked for a chiropractor, so I was getting free adjustments all the time. So I don't think I quite noticed how bad it was getting until suddenly, like you said, it snapped. Like it really
I wonder if that snap that you had was caused by something chirony, like something in your life that you weren't happy with and that was hiding under the surface, and something Saturnian, like life lessons, and then altogether they just snapped you back.
I think so.
Yeah.
And I don't actually think it's of this life. I think because Chiron and in Pisces and Neptune in Pisces, whenever I see Pisces, I always think of spirit and past lives. That's like where my brain immediately goes. I don't think this was of this life. I think this was healing crap I had to do from a previous life.
And also because Uranus, where that is the snap we're talking about, is right across from your moon in the 12th house. And the 12th house is the house of past lives.
Yes. And at the day I chose, August 25th. Now, like I said, I'm pretty sure this issue happened either the 25th or 26th. So if that's the case, the moon would have been going over my moon.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Exactly. And I have, whenever there's transits from around my moon or Uranus, I can feel them profoundly. They are at the same degree. So they're both at 4 degrees, Gemini, 4 degrees, Sagittarius. And when you have your moon across from Uranus, your nervous system really becomes massively affected by emotions and emotional chaos. And I mean, you can't not have spinal issues and nervous system be related, right? Like that's where your nervous system goes, is your spine.
Yeah.
So my nervous system was really on the fray already, and this was like the rope finally just that was it.
Yep. And then what did you have to learn? You learned that you really had to dig in deep and sort of from the ground up rebuild your spine with stem cell transplantation?
This was really the start of a whole new way of me viewing health and well-being and personal development and parenting. They're all intricately related because at this time in my life, I had very few tools to manage the chaos that my children were causing every day because they're children. And we had, as we just explored, 5.5 years of fertility struggles. And then we had Elliot, and then we had Gertie, and then we had Gwen, like really close together. 4 years, we had 3 children. So for 5.5 years, I wanted children. And then I suddenly got lots of children. There is nobody on earth who can prepare you for the mental chaos that is 3 small children who show up all at once.
Yeah.
And so I didn't have the tools to manage the stress that they brought and their 3 different intense personalities. And I think this was the snapping of me learning I could not lose my shit the way I was on a regular basis, right? I was losing it and screaming, like really, really fireball screaming. This, again, was generational stuff that I was taught through my lineage. That's how you deal with chaos, right?
Yeah.
Is you just scream. And so yelling and screaming was my part of my MO and my upbringing. And I realized that that was affecting my physical body so profoundly that it was breaking me.
Yeah.
By yelling, my cortisol was just skyrocketing through the roof. And then my hormones would get so off that my mental health would crash because I don't have the right hormones going. I don't have the right serotonin. I don't have the right dopamine. And I'm just freaking out, really. And I'm having constant fight or flight freakouts that are way too intense for my body to deal with. And again, when you've got air and fire, I was burning from the inside out. I really was. Yeah. And I don't know how else to describe it, but that's what happened. And then the snap of my back taught me I can't keep on this path. Like, this is not working. And there was so much surrendering that had to happen and so much conscious work and conscious realization of the systems that needed to change. Well, look what Jupiter and the sun were going through Virgo at that time. Virgo's all about your systems, right? Creating your spreadsheets and creating your systems and working on your health all the time, right? So, and Saturn going through my 6th house going, hey, you need to do this every single day.
Yeah, and another interesting thing about this is that Saturn actually rules bones.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's an interesting aspect to it as well.
Isn't it just, it's so intriguing. It's so, this is fascinating to me to go back in time and
you
look
had to
at
learn a new lesson, and actually, like, your actual bones had to break for that.
Yeah, and pinch those nerves, and like literally the bones were coming together because the padding, what was happening is the discs weren't there anymore. So my muscles in my back were trying to maintain stability. Well, your muscles are not meant to do that. Your muscles are meant to, you know, move and flex. They're not meant to stay rigid to keep you formed. And that's what they were trying to do. So my muscles in my back that were attaching to my spine were getting very locked, very Saturn, right? They were becoming very hard and rigid. And that was causing so many other issues, right? Like that was just triggering all the way down my legs. And it was pretty awful because there was no exercises I could do. There was nothing I could do to loosen things. Because when I did, then the nerves would get pinched again and then I couldn't function anyway. So it was pretty awful. And I was doing my best to check out in any way I could to avoid the pain. So I just kept doing Jupiter and trying to have fun with friends and our new lifestyle and all that, going, no, I'm okay. It's okay. I'll just go. I could still kind of dance. So I would throw myself on the dance floor. And I was using a lot of cannabis at this time for pain management, a lot. And Saturn rules cannabis, which makes sense. So I was very, very much self-medicating because I couldn't do any kind of prescriptions. My body doesn't process them. So I couldn't do any kind of hard prescriptions or anything for pain.
So I was self-medicating and it was sort of working.
It was what you had to do for that time.
For sure.
I mean, if you're in that much pain, there's not much you can do. You just have to, because it's also very stressful for the whole body to be in constant pain.
Really stressful.
Yeah.
Really stressful.
So I think it's really interesting. It would be really cool to have you guys send in different dates of when things shifted in your life, like major shifts, and we could take a look at them. So if you'd be up for that, just email us at ramgoatastrology@gmail.com.
That would be amazing. I would love to go back and see what was going on for people and help them unpack stuff. It sort of takes off a weight that, oh, I did something wrong, or maybe I didn't do something the right way, you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it does. It does. It gives you, and it's not like blaming things. It's just finding acceptance within yourself, for yourself. I did the best I could at that time, and I can see there was lessons to be learned, and yeah,
I love it. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us as we explore the past and check out how the transits showed up for us, and we can't wait to have you join us again next time. So thank you so much.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in. If you would like to be a part of our show or have a personal reading done with us, email us at ramgoatastrology@gmail.com. We can't wait to hear from you. See you next week.